most of all of it. But I understood what he was saying about the. I thought it was pretty. I mean, you know, a lot of physics in it, but the guy's just funny. It's funny to see people that are perfectly comfortable with being really strange. He wouldn't say it's strange; it's normal for him. We've had another mix-up in the agenda, so we're going to change it around just a little bit. And our next speaker, if you don't mind, I'll bring you up a little bit early. Jeff Small. I'm going to go ahead and he's talking about the overdressed Jeff Small is going to talk about technology ubiquity, a brief history of the future. Now, a brief introduction. Jeff's a tech guy. I see he's always on Facebook talking about new technology, new games, fighting with his daughter over Legos. There's really interesting things. And but I know it mostly through comic books. Me and him both are comic book nerds. And so when we get together, we talk comic books. Even on the iPad, he's got tons of comics on his iPad. So I don't know exactly what he's going to talk about. It's in the synopsis. But I gather it's going to be an interesting mix of tech and Jeff's witty banter. And while he's getting loaded. Where'd you get that uniform for the picture? Very good.
I thought this was a cool topic to talk about because it goes back about 8 years ago. I built a house, my first house. My wife and I finally moved into our own house, and I worked closely with the construction team and the contractor who let me get into the house the weekend before they were putting the drywall up, because I had these huge plans about how I was going to wire my house. My house was going to be the house of the future. And I was trying to explain all of this to my contractor, who had never dealt with anyone like me before, had no idea what I was talking about, no idea what I wanted to do. And the only thing that I could think about that I wanted to tell him was, I want this to be ubiquitous. I want the stuff that I put in my house to be everywhere and permeate every bit of the house, but I don't want it to be obvious. I don't want you to see wires. I don't want you to see, you know, I want to try to wire this thing for the future, and I don't want it to be obvious. You know, I want it to be part of my everyday experiences with my house. And so this topic's always been something that I've really enjoyed. The idea of ubiquitous technology, which I think we can all agree on right now, is something that we're actually seeing. So over the course of putting this presentation together, I actually discovered, I actually sort of migrated a little bit in my thoughts and philosophies on this, and I discovered sort of a lot of interesting things. First off, if any of you have seen Minority Report or any of these sort of science fiction movies, this is a great demonstration of what I call ubiquitous technology. It's this idea that you're walking around all day and this technology is part of your life. It's just something that you take for granted and it's everywhere. Star Trek was a great example. Science fiction's done a great job of doing this, but science fiction is relatively new. Science fiction is a product of the 20th century. So this isn't something outside of Jules Verne that a lot of people have a lot of experience with. So even the idea of science fiction is what I would call ubiquitous, because this is something that we take for granted that we have. You go to the movies on Friday, you have a choice of probably a romance movie, a drama, and probably a science fiction movie that in some way demonstrates what the future is going to be like, you know, or demonstrates some sort of technology-based, you know, theme or idea. And ubiquitous just means widely present, you know. So the ubiquitous part of it is fine, but what about the technology part of it? Well, I actually found out that the word technology was invented by Aristotle. I didn't know this. It was actually, the first use of the word was in Aristotle's Rhetoric. And it was actually a word that he created that meant a skill in communication. All right, that's the first use of the word technology, and he did techne and logos together, and it's never been referred to since. It wasn't referred to again until 1802. Johann Beckmann used the word in his Guide to Technology. What was happening around the time of the Industrial Revolution was all of these things were starting to change our lives, and what had previously been things like chemistry and science and medicine, which were these arcane practices, you know, practiced by artisans basically, were starting to merge into a unified sort of universe of thinking. And Johann Beckmann called this technology. He called this like, there needs to be a sort of rigorous study of technology. And so in Germany, he had written the first guide to technology as a way to sort of unify all of these thought processes together and sort of teach them as a way to recognize that technology was affecting our lives. This is right around the time of the Industrial Revolution. So you're starting to see people who, through the Luddites and through various movements, who are starting to recognize that there's something permeating society, and it's called technology. Because prior to this, basically our main technological achievements were things like the screw, the lever, the plow. You would go thousands of years before you would have technological achievements that would affect society on a large scale, the most notable of which would have been the printing press at that point. But around the time of the Industrial Revolution, you started to get steam power, and people were working with electricity and mass production of things. And suddenly the artisan, the guy who was the craftsman, who was creating things by himself, by hand, there were technologies to assist in the creation of these things, and they were impacting people's lives. Prices were coming down on things that would traditionally have been cost prohibitive. Photography is a great example. You would have had to commission a painting to have your family taken. To have a portrait of your family would have involved you commissioning an artist to paint a painting of your family. And think of the impact that photography had on the idea that suddenly you could take a photograph of your family and you could have it in a day. You could take 2, you could take 3. They were expensive at the time, they still were a little bit costly, but you could have it done, and you could have it done in a way that hadn't been done before. So an interesting thing that I discovered is since 1790, every president has given a State of the Union address. All right? Every incoming president, and every year, every 4 years, there's been a State of the Union address. The word technology didn't appear in the State of the Union until 1939. All right? So that's how recent technology is in our lives. All right? Now, I kind of wanted to create, sort of list the top 10 technological inventions of all time, but I really only got about 8. All right? So the first one, obviously, is the wheel. All right? That's one of our obvious technological achievements. We have electricity, the printing press, the camera, the telephone, the automobile, the airplane, and the steam engine. Now, these are just sort of my own, these aren't certified by any board of technological achievements or anything like that. These are just my own sort of personal favorites that I thought had the most impact in terms of ubiquity, in terms of affecting our lives in ways that sort of permeated our everyday life. All right? So, for the purpose of this conversation, I wanted to focus on 4 of them. I thought we'd go through a little history of 4 technologies that I think are really ubiquitous and have affected us in ways that we probably don't realize every day. We probably don't stop and think about that, and that's really the definition of ubiquity. You don't think about plugging things into a wall, where does that electricity come from, or what happened, or what technical achievements you did that do it, and think of all the technology that's based on all of those previous inventions and previous discoveries. So the first one we'll talk about is electricity. All right? In 1752, Ben Franklin discovered the lightning rod. In 1878, Edison Electric Light Company was the first electric utility. So look at the distance in time. 1752 to 1878 was when we first realized that we could mass produce electricity and distribute it to the masses. All right? So it took a while for people to sort of wrap their heads around how they were going to do that. In 1882, 4 years later, the Hearthstone House in Appleton, Wisconsin, was the first electric-powered suburban household in America. And it was powered by an Edison power plant. All right? Edison used to sell power plants. He would sell power plants to communities. If you had a dam or you had a river, well, that was a perfect opportunity. Edison would come in and sell you a power plant, and then they would show you how to run wires to houses, and you could actually light houses with electricity. The White House in 1891, Benjamin Harrison was the first president to cut on electric lights. They didn't trust the power. They were afraid of getting electrocuted. They had to help use all the light switches. All right. In 1907, the first lights came to Conway, South Carolina. You guys might like that. All right. So here we are, 1878, 1882, 1907, the first lights come to Conway. And in 1940, Horry Electric Cooperative was formed to bring electricity to rural Horry County. Think about that. There's a war going on, and they're bringing electricity to rural Horry County. There are still homes in Horry County that don't have electricity in 1940, and the co-op was formed to sort of bring electricity out to these houses that are in outlying areas. All right? The next one is the telephone. And the telephone was a ubiquitous technology that I think was made significant leaps and bounds, but there were minor leaps and bounds, and they benefited from other technologies. For instance, microelectronics and digital transmission and all of these other discoveries and other disciplines aided the advancement of the telephone. So the significant advances in telephone came from other technologies that were discovered peripherally to the telephone. In 1876, Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you, first telephone broadcast. I don't know if a lot of you realize this, but the phone was actually discovered within hours of another invention of the phone, and there was actually a race to the patent office. Edison got there first. All right, so in 1879, the first phone was installed in the White House. Thomas Edison showed Benjamin Harrison how to use the phone. In 1973, the Dynatac 8000X by Motorola was invented. All right, this was the first cellular phone demonstrated in public. All right, and then lastly, third, we have photography. Photography I thought was the most fascinating one because there were a lot of significant inventions that sort of edged this along to ubiquity and really migrated the use of the camera in ways that probably none of us ever expected. And I think towards the end of this, when I started looking into the history of photography, it started to go in a direction that I wasn't really prepared for it to go in. But I think we can all agree it's actually there now that we see. The word photography was first coined in 1839. In 1840, Eastman Kodak developed flexible film. Right? That was a huge milestone achievement in film, which allowed you to create rolls of film. In 1901, they developed the Brownie, and then in 1935, they developed Kodachrome, mass-produced color film. All right, so think about this. We're still talking about film cameras. We're still talking about individual users loading film into a camera, taking pictures, sending it off to be developed. In 1969, at AT&T Bell Labs, they developed the charged coupling device. You guys might not know what that is, but you might know it by another name, the CCD. This is what enables digital pictures to be captured, all right? This was an invention by Bell Labs, AT&T Bell Labs, and in 1986, Kodak developed the first megapixel sensor. The first megapixel sensor using a charged coupling device that captured a digital image. That's actually the first megapixel sensor. In 1997, Philippe Kahn, who later went on to form Borland Software Company, jury-rigged a camera to a telephone, took a picture of his brand new daughter being born, and uploaded it to the internet for the very first time. That's the first recorded cell phone image that was uploaded to the internet and shared publicly. Now, there are actually several other companies that claim the idea that they were the first with a camera phone, but here's the great thing. That's the only picture that's ever been produced from a cell phone that dates back to 1997. So that's his claim on the idea that he created this himself. He created the cell phone himself, or the camera phone himself. And this is where it starts to migrate into territory that I think we can all agree sort of defines the idea of ubiquity. In 2001, Sharp developed the JSH-04, which is the first camera phone, all right? And in 2003, 2 years later, camera phones outnumber digital cameras. 2 years later. Within a year of Sharp introducing the JSH-04, they call it the J-phone in Japan. Within a year of Sharp introducing the J-phone, more than 50% of their subscribers were using camera phones. That's how fast this technology was adopted. And in 2004, Nokia is the biggest manufacturer of cameras in the world. Nokia. They make cell phones, but now they're the largest manufacturer of cameras in the world. The last one is computers and internet, which is my own personal favorite. Now this guy is either going to sell you a computer or make a porn movie with you, and I can't decide which one he's going to do. So. Yeah. So in 1957, this is great. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik. All right. In 1958, DARPA is formed, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. The mission of DARPA, this was formed under Eisenhower in 1958. The mission under DARPA is not to be surprised by technology again. All right, that was the mission of DARPA, was that they were so surprised that the Soviets had launched something into space that the United States response to that was, okay, that's it, that ain't gonna happen anymore. We're forming an agency whose whole mission is advanced research projects and technology. And one of the first things they developed was they wanted a way that computers could communicate back and forth together along long distances. One of the requirements of this was, if you had a nuclear attack and one of the computers was knocked out, you had to be able to reroute information around it. So this was the first sort of requirement that dictated the creation of a computer network. All right, so the government was the first agency that decided that they needed a computer network, and it had to be redundant, and you had to be able to get traffic around other places. All right, so they're the precursors to the internet, and there was actually a technical government reason for its creation. In 1971, a guy named Ray Tomlinson came along, and Ray Tomlinson is famous, and I'm going to tell you why he's famous. He's famous because everybody in here has an email, right? You know the little @ symbol in your email? He invented that. All right? He invented the modern email format. All right? And so that happened in 1971. In 1975, something called a request for comments, 675, was a specification for internet transmission control program. All right? In short, that's just somebody sending out a whole list and a request for other scientists out there to comment on the idea that this guy's come up with TCP/IP, which is the precursor to the internet. This guy in 1975, Vint Cerf, headed the program. They created the idea that they were going to create a protocol that was going to start transferring information around the internet. And so this was the beginnings of the real internet that we know. And this happened in 1975. Years after DARPA was formed and after Sputnik is launched. In 1976, Apple Computers formed. In 1979, two Duke University grad students have a great idea. They're going to transmit information. All right, they're not going to. Not only are they going to transmit data, but they're going to start sharing information on computer networks. This is the beginning, I think, of the information age. I think this is when they formed Usenet. This was a user network, and it was between Duke University and North Carolina State University, I believe, and they were simply sharing messages. That's all they were doing. And it was a modern user network, and all they did was just share information, and this was the precursor to information sharing. NNTP is Network News Transfer Protocol. That's just the idea that these guys were sort of solidifying the technology behind what was going to happen. In 1990, Tim Berners-Lee coins the phrase World Wide Web and creates the first web server, which is right there. That's the actual first web server on the internet. And that happened in 1991. I mean, I remember what I was doing in 1991. In 1993, the Mosaic browser is formed. In 1994, Jerry Yang and David Philo create Jerry's Guide to the World Wide Web. They decide to leave the university and form a company called Yahoo. You may have heard of it. In 1998, Google is formed. All right, and this is the actual original Google servers.
Wow.
Right? In 2007, the iPhone is released by Apple. So you can see that we're making steps towards ubiquity, and all of this stuff is leading towards something that's going to be ingratiated in our lives, right? And a lot of this leads to, like, what's next? Well, personally, I think biology and biochemistry is next. I think the places where we're going to start seeing hacking and where we're going to start seeing ubiquity and stuff is going to be in things like recombinant DNA technology and technologies that are new right now, but they're not going to be new forever. And like Clifford Stoll says, the first time you do it is science, the second time is engineering, the third time is just technology. All right? So what does all of this mean? I think ubiquity serves as a platform for development of future technology. Is that right? For further development of technology. Right. I think when things become ubiquitous, it gives us security to start looking out on other things. And I think another way to say that is we jump from rocks of safety, I feel like. Like our technology now is a rock of safety. Test the rocks we land on, then leap again when we're comfortable. I think ubiquity serves as a good platform for launching new technologies, right? So look at what we're going to start doing now. And is it a good thing? I think it is. I think all of this technology benefits our lives. I think it makes our lives better. I think we can all agree that we're much better off than we were 10 years ago. maybe not financially, but, and then to end it, I think, I read a book by Kevin Kelly recently that says technology wants what life wants: increasing efficiency, increasing opportunity, increasing emergence, complexity, diversity, specialization, ubiquity, freedom, mutualism, beauty, sentience, structure, and evolvability. And I'll leave you with, is the framework which changes with each new technology and not just the picture within the frame, by Marshall McLuhan. So, thanks.